It's clear he's trying to militarize our cities. He's doing that with ICE now. He's also trying to just, show off that he is, in fact, an authoritarian and can do whatever it is that he wants. And we're pushing back and we're winning.
Hello, and welcome to The Conversation. I'm Dasha Burns, Politico's White House bureau chief, and every week on this show, I invite one of the most compelling power players in Washington and beyond in for a chat to find out how they're navigating and shaping this incredible era of American politics. And we started this week, same as we started last week, in the middle of a government shutdown that shows no signs of an end anytime soon. Democrats, Republicans not really talking to each other, both dug in. There has been movement, though, overseas. I traveled with the president as part of the White House press pool on his trip to the Middle East to tout a peace deal between Israel and Hamas. That peace, though, is already proving fragile. Both sides have already accused the other of violating the agreement, so we're going to be watching all of that very, very closely. And the president is hoping to strike another peace deal. He is hosting Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in the White House as the U.S. is attempting to push Russia towards peace. And there's a bit of a standoff between Secretary Pete Hegseth and reporters as the Pentagon is trying to impose restrictive policies on the press. And finally, one other major domestic story is the president still pushing to deploy National Guard troops to American cities to tackle immigration and crime. That is still making its way through the courts. But state and local leaders are taking the fight to the president. One Democrat leading that resistance is Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker. I caught up with him this week remotely to discuss the battle of narratives surrounding Chicago and his response to the administration and what he wants to see for the future of the Democratic Party. Here's my conversation with J.B. Pritzker. Governor J.B. Pritzker of Illinois, thank you so much for joining the conversation.
Thanks, Dasha. Great to be with you.
I wanted to first ask you about a message that the president had for you from Air Force One. I asked him about you and what's happening in Illinois and in Chicago, and he told me, quote, "I think he should beg for help because he's running a bad operation and he's letting people be killed in his city. I would have Chicago cleaned out, the criminals removed." What's your response to that?
Well, I know that the president doesn't read much and isn't up to speed on much of anything going on around the country, but we've cut our violent crime rate significantly in Chicago, and indeed, our homicide rate has been cut in half. Almost every violent crime statistic is down by double digits. Maybe most importantly, what the president doesn't understand is that civilian law enforcement is how you fight crime. And we've got terrific people on the ground. We've been building up our police forces, including the state police under my command. And frankly, the money that the federal government used to send to us has now been cut off under him. He's cut the number of FBI, ATF, and DEA agents that are available to help us with crime on the ground. We're nevertheless doing well despite that, but would love help. I've said that many times. Please give us civilian law enforcement help from FBI, ATF, and DEA so that we can interdict guns and drugs and go after gang members.
You had mentioned that crime is down in Chicago. You're right. Murders are down in Chicago by more than 30% this year compared to 2024. Shootings have fallen almost 40% according to city data, but that does still translate to 1,200 people being shot and at least 274 murders. And I'm curious if you feel satisfied with where the crime statistics are in Chicago and in Illinois overall.
Look, I won't be satisfied until we get those numbers to zero, which may be never, which means I shouldn't be satisfied on any day, and I'm not. What I think we should pay attention to, though, is that so much crime has been reduced in the city of Chicago, and we're talking about the murder rate is down by half in the last 4 years. And in part, the reason that so much of the violent crime in the city is down is because we have the most robust community violence intervention programs in the country. And despite the fact that Donald Trump cut the funding for those programs. We've funded it at the state level as best we can, although, again, we have less money because of that. And we have worked with ATF and FBI and DEA to go after the drugs and gangs and guns. And we need more of that. And I've asked for more of that. But the idea that sending troops in or that ICE is somehow helping with that is ridiculous.
What do you think he's trying to do?
Well, it's clear he's trying to militarize our cities. And ICE, he's doing that with ICE now. I think that at the moment, though, he's also trying to just, show off that he is, in fact, an authoritarian and can do whatever it is that he wants. And we're pushing back and we're winning.
The president last week posted on Truth Social saying that you and Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson should be in jail. J.D. Vance said on Sunday that you should, quote, suffer some consequences for your handling of Chicago crime. Talk to me about this moment that you're in. You're drawing some pretty threatening rhetoric from the White House.
Well, all I can say is that, again, with the president's mental health decline, the fact that J.D. Vance really doesn't know anything about addressing crime, fighting crime. He was a U.S. senator and before that an author. All due respect, we've been actually doing the job on the ground. And then, threatening to jail your political opponents. I mean, does that sound like the United States? Should we have a president who is threatening to jail his political opponents with no evidence of any wrongdoing, just that we oppose what he's trying to do to our country, which is to militarize our cities and turn us into an authoritarian regime? I don't think that any American thinks that we ought to be jailing people just for their views.
How does that feel for you personally? I mean, especially when you are seeing the Justice Department go after folks like James Comey, like Letitia James. Does that resonate with you in a different way in this moment, given what the administration is doing?
I'm not afraid for me. I'm afraid for the people of Illinois and the people of the United States. With the attitude of this president, when people can just randomly be stopped, detained, arrested, and then, when he's going after his political opponents, note that anybody that he doesn't like and thinks is opposed to him is on his list of, his targets, enemies list, as we've seen. So, look, it's not about me. It is about protecting the people of my state. And that's what I've been doing every day.
And you're walking an interesting line here because you've been pretty outspoken about state sovereignty, right? But given that there are some federal interests here, right? Immigration enforcement, in your mind, where is the line between legitimate federal authority when it comes to trying to curtail gang activity and other things that really do matter in these communities, and political interference from Washington?
The president has said that he wanted to go after the worst of the worst. Please come get real violent criminals. And we would love help doing that, whether they're undocumented or otherwise. And he's not doing that. They're not, when they tackle a 15-year-old girl because she's brown. I mean, this is not the country that I think we all want. And so I'm deeply concerned. All I can say is this is not what anybody signed up for. The immigration laws should be enforced by the federal government. They have that authority and that assignment. But the way they're doing it is ignoring all of the norms of law enforcement and treating people as if they're enemies of the United States, when the reality is they're grabbing Republicans, Democrats, they're grabbing U.S. citizens and people who've never demonstrated that they're anything other than law-abiding people.
There is kind of a battle of narratives here right now. The president frequently calls Chicago a hellhole or a war zone. Law and order was a really big part of his campaign message, and it did resonate with some voters. Can you talk about those competing narratives, what's actually going on in Chicago, but also why Trump has been successful in some pockets of the country of painting and branding Chicago in this way, as he has with Portland and some other cities?
Look, the president lies consistently, and he's got a lot of people around him, the sycophants, including J.D. Vance, who lie on his behalf. He's got the biggest platform in the country, the presidency, and he just says things. It's propaganda, again, not true. but he'll say it over and over and over again, hoping that people will believe him.
And some of that branding exercise that has been successful, though. Don't you
Sure,
think?
because if you say things over and over and there isn't any pushback, then you're somewhat successful. I can tell you that Chicago, I mean, just to give you an idea, this summer we had our best tourist season ever in the city of Chicago. We just got named for the 9th year, by the way, #1 best big city in the country by Condé Nast Traveler magazine. I mean, it's a great city. It's a beautiful city. I know lots of people that probably you know too who have visited this city, and they don't see what Donald Trump is talking about because it's not true. He just says things. Again, Portland isn't on fire. And yet, you're right. He lies. He says it over and over again. And if it gets amplified by mainstream media or by podcasts or whatever, then there are people who might listen and believe it, but it's not true.
What do you say, though, to some of the residents in Chicago that might not agree with like the National Guard being deployed there, right? But do feel like the city is not as safe as it should be and do want to see more cooperation from like local and state authorities with what Trump is trying to do?
Well, I can say this, that first, every crime that gets committed should be pursued. The person should be pursued and arrested, particularly violent crimes. And it's one of the reasons that we've been successful at reducing crime here is that we're actually doing that on the ground. We no longer have support from the federal government for that effort because the community violence intervention funds have been taken away. Funding for our police has been taken away. I mean, he's the man who said that he was opposed to defunding the police, and yet he's done exactly that and defunded the FBI, I might add.
When were those funds taken away from law enforcement?
Defunding the FBI?
Yeah.
Oh, are you kidding me? I mean, he's taken FBI agents and moved them into other
in terms
agencies.
of impacting things in Chicago with law enforcement in Chicago and in Illinois.
Community violence intervention funds were taken away months and months ago. Those are programs that are very important for the summer months when crime is usually up in big cities, and yet it got taken away from us. Look, I've been funding community violence intervention at the state level for some time, but those federal dollars are vitally important. We're nevertheless keeping our crime rate down and indeed reducing it even more on our own. But we could use help. There are people who are terribly affected by crime in neighborhoods, not just in Chicago, but across the country, and they deserve more help from the federal government. But the president doesn't want to give them any help. He wants to militarize our cities for some other purpose.
One of the things that this administration has tried to do is put Democrats on the back foot when it comes to crime. How do you walk the line of making sure people understand that you're taking crime really seriously while also resisting what the administration is doing?
Well, we're delivering on the ground. That's how we prove that he's wrong, right? I've increased the number of state police since I took office in 2019. We're trying very hard to do that. By the way, they're running ads now.
Attention, Chicago law enforcement. You took an oath to protect and serve.
To hire people out of Chicago police departments and other departments here and bring them into ICE. So he's going to take civilian law enforcement off the streets in order to help him with this folly about going after the worst of the worst immigrants to this country. I want to remind you that something really important. My family are a family of immigrants who were refugees to this country from Ukraine when the Russians were killing Jews. We have a very important history in this country of immigrants being the lifeblood of building the economy and building the future of the country. Half of the Fortune 500 companies in this country are founded by immigrants or the first generation children of immigrants. So Donald Trump just has this all backward in his head. It's some kind of something that's left over from, I don't know, his childhood or some other time, and his diminished mental capacity has him unable to learn anything new.
Hey, Governor, you and I share some heritage. I was born in Ukraine, actually immigrated to the United States as a child. So,
oh my gosh, well, we have a huge population of Ukrainians who come to the city of Chicago here. Come visit us.
We're everywhere.
Yes, we are.
You have warned that Trump could use these troop deployments as pretext for military interference in U.S. election. Is that something you see as a real threat?
I do. You have to think back to 2020 when he lost the general election and he contemplated using the military to confiscate ballot boxes. And it was something being encouraged by Michael Flynn, his advisor. And then, fast forward just another month to January 6th, when he was fomenting the violence around the Capitol around the election, and then later pardoned the 1,500 people who were convicted of a crime. Now he's militarizing the cities, sending people in. And I think it's not very far away from him offering and providing military to protect the polling places in across America, but particularly in blue states and blue cities, with the idea that they could confiscate the ballot boxes if they think there is fraud in the election. Now, let me remind you, the Department of Justice under Donald Trump demanded that every state produce their voter rolls. That's never happened in the history of the United States. They won't tell us what they're doing with them, but it appears that they want to use them in the elections next year, claiming fraud. So when you put all these things together, it's not a leap to say that he's doing this because he wants to affect the 2026 elections in favor of MAGA Republicans.
Trump has suggested he might invoke the Insurrection Act. If federal troops were deployed over your objections, what would you do? Do you have a plan for that scenario?
Yeah, so just a reminder that the president previously, and this is just a few years ago, said that he opposes a president of the United States federalizing National Guard. So did Kristi Noem last year. So did Greg Abbott in Texas last year. So did every governor, I might add, last year oppose federalizing the National Guard. He has obviously federalized National Guard over my objection, but it's the question the court is addressing is how can he use those? Because federalizing the National Guard to send them abroad to fight for this country, which is what historically National Guard has been federalized for, is a legitimate use. We've seen that. I'm so proud of the Illinois National Guard. They've gone and fought for this country and protected us abroad. And also, I have the ability to call them out for floods or other emergencies like COVID-19, making sure we had vaccinations available for everybody. But, it's like everything is upside down. Now, because the president has decided federalizing troops is okay and sending them into states is okay, now all of his sycophants, all of his followers, like Kristi Noem, like Greg Abbott and others, are just doing what his bidding is. I know it's unconstitutional. It's unlawful. It's called the Insurrection Act for a reason. It's about insurrection. It's about rebellion. It's about foreign invasions. And that's why you use the Insurrection Act. It shouldn't be about his invasion of our states.
As you've seen, this administration is really pushing the boundaries of what all these things mean, right? So in the scenario that he does invoke this and sends troops into Chicago, like, what is the plan?
Well, again, the courts are hugely important here, and we've been winning in court.
But the Insurrection Act is a way for him to circumvent some of what the courts are doing, is what he's arguing.
No, you can't circumvent the courts. He can invoke the Insurrection Act illegally and then be taken to court about it, but he can't circumvent the courts. We have a system of checks and balances for exactly this reason. The executive shouldn't be able to override the law. And so we're doing everything we can in that regard. We're, of course, making sure that people know what their rights are on the ground. We're trying to protect people as best we can. But look, he's the one who is fomenting violence by suggesting that he's going to call troops into our cities and our states when we don't want them or need them.
You said when there's a Democrat in office or when a Democratic Congress takes over that, quote, people are going to be held accountable. And you said a few years from now, this is going to hurt. What is that going to look like? Do you think Democrats would or should push for jail time for some of these officials? Like, how far should Democrats go if and when they do get power back?
Democrats should just do what Republicans should do but are unwilling to, which is follow the law. That means if someone broke the law, whether you're an ICE agent or a CBP agent or Stephen Miller, if they broke the law, they should be held accountable. One more thing, though, the Congress is supposed to have hearings about things like this. You talked about pushing the line. Actually, they've gone way over the line in the federal government. And there should be hearings by Congress, by rational people on both sides should come together and ask questions about this. That's not what's happening. They're simply following Donald Trump's lead on the Republican side and not allowing Democrats to have hearings to ask questions. I believe that's why the 2026 elections are so vitally important.
Who do you want to see seat in front of Congress for these hearings?
For example, Kash Patel and Pam Bondi on the question of, did Tom Homan break the law? Are they ignoring all of that because they like Tom Homan and don't want him to be prosecuted? That's just one example of something that should be asked of some of these officials. What about Kristi Noem, Gregory Bavino, and Tom Homan on the subject of mistreating people on the streets of Chicago and Portland, tossing people down on the ground who are U.S. citizens and legally here, and frankly, undocumented people who are here who still have constitutional rights, because that's what our Constitution says when you're in the United States. These are all questions that Congress should be asking.
Democrats in Congress right now are trying to take a stand with the shutdown fight. They're using it to make a case for health care. You're obviously not directly involved here, but given how you've called on Democrats to step up, what do you think of these efforts?
I think that doubling people's premiums for health care, which is what will happen under the big ugly bill, is truly shameful. I think that Democrats standing up to maintain those subsidies so that people don't have their healthcare premiums doubled or have to reduce their coverage because they can't afford healthcare. I think that's a righteous cause. And so I'm glad that Democrats are standing up and doing the right thing on that.
What more would you like to see national Democrats doing in this moment?
Well, I'd like to see a proposal for national immigration reform. I think that we need comprehensive reform, and we ought to be contemplating this question. What should we do with people who've been here for 10 or 20 years or 30 years, who hold down jobs and pay taxes and have families? They're law-abiding. They're doing all the things you'd want your neighbors and friends to do. They are our neighbors and friends. Do you really want to throw them out and then have an immigration process that would then, have them from outside the country come back in when they're already productive members of our society? Or should we have some other thing going on? Should we really be tackling people in the streets because of the color of their skin to toss all these people out? Or perhaps we ought to give them some process that they could go through while they're still here. And of course, we should be grabbing and tossing out of the country people who are committing violent crimes, who are undocumented. They don't belong here. I don't want them in my state. I don't want them in this country. Get the worst of the worst out. But that's not what they're doing.
You've been in the headlines a lot for things that the president has said about you. But you've also been in some headlines because of something that a former vice president, former presidential candidate has said about you in her book. Former VP Kamala Harris made a note in her book that you declined to immediately offer her an endorsement, that you said you couldn't commit because you were the convention host. You did endorse the next day. But I'm curious about that initial hesitation. And also, why do you think Harris put that in her book?
I don't know. We're friends. I know Kamala Harris. I've talked to her a number of times in the last, couple of months, not to mention during the elections. And what I can say is that, yeah, that's accurate. I didn't know what the process was going to be. I don't think any of us did right away when President Biden decided not to run. And so I wanted to make sure that we weren't biasing a process that might occur at the convention itself in my home state, home city. It was clear to me overnight and in the next morning that actually the process had already, worked itself out. And it made sense to me to have the vice president become the candidate for our party. And I like her and was, happy to get on board and support her and worked very hard for her. But yeah, I think it was important for me to be neutral. I fought to get the convention in my city and state, and I didn't want to bias a process that might take place.
The reason I ask about the past is because, as you know, past informs future. We learn lessons, we take them, and we move forward. And this does get to my broader question about the moment for Democrats. Another Chicago guy, Rahm Emanuel, has called the party's brand toxic, says Democrats are woke and weak. I'm interested in your diagnosis. What you think of his diagnosis? Is your diagnosis different? And what do you see as the path forward for the party?
I think we have too many challenges facing the country for Democrats to be criticizing other Democrats. We know what the problem with this country is right now, and it's what Donald Trump is doing to it. So if there's a unifying force, that certainly is one. And in a midterm election, and I think back to when I got elected in 2018, that was a unifying force back then. I think it will be this coming year, but we're going to have to work for it. I don't think we aren't going to get handed anything. And Donald Trump is trying to thwart the election process in 2026. I mentioned, of course, the militarization, but also going to Texas, to the governor of Texas and getting him to redistrict and trying to do it in Missouri and other states. This is truly taking votes away from people. We're talking mid-decade political redistricting that just doesn't happen very often, is now being led by the president of the United States. And it's for one purpose. It's because he knows he's going to lose in 2026 if he doesn't rig the elections.
So do you think the best message and the best sort of approach for Democrats is being the resistance, is fighting Trump? Is that what voters want to see from their Democratic officials and candidates?
They want to see people they want to see Democrats standing up for working families, for their ability to afford the things that are just, frankly, part of their everyday lives. I mean, if you can't send your kid to college, or you can't afford to pay the bills at the table or at the kitchen table, you can't afford groceries or insurance, I mean, all the rest of it doesn't matter to most people. So we Democrats need to be talking about that. Is the party.
Are you doing that enough, do you think? Do you think Democrats are talking about those real, tangible, like moment-to-moment, day-to-day issues for folks? I
think that we have to walk and chew gum at the same time. That is to say, we certainly need to be talking about affordability, and a lot of us are doing it. At the same time, we need to fight to make sure we have an election in 2026 and that we're preserving democracy. I think we can do two things at once.
Governor Pritzker, thank you so much for joining the conversation amid so much going on in your state. We appreciate the time.
Thanks, Dasha.
This has been The Conversation with Dasha Burns. We'll be back next week. And if you want to catch future episodes of The Conversation, make sure to click that subscribe button below. Thanks for watching.